I've been on a number of them, and I can tell you that no two have been the same. There are some commonalities, but each one is a new experience. It's almost like preaching a sermon, and even if you preach the same sermon, it comes out different the next time. Uh, the title of this one is Short-Term Missions, Benefit or Bane. I'm going to try sharing screen to see if this lined up for me or not. Uh, Please let me know if we are in the screen correctly. Do we make it? We're good?
Got it.
Okay.
Looks perfect.
Just for our definitions, for benefit, I'm just using a kid's definition, something good or helpful that you get or it happens to you. That's the benefit of a short-term missions or something else. What about a bane? Bane is a cause of great distress or annoyance. And I can tell you that short-term mission trips are sometimes both, both. Um, or I could say either, and it can happen on the same mission trip. Because I'm a mission trip junkie, you already know where I'm coming from. So let me just start off by listing what I think are some of the main benefits. And first one, I'd say that these are new, intense opportunities. Secondly, I would say you can make an obvious difference. As a pastor, sometimes it seems the work I do yields no results, but on a short-term mission trip, I can see that I make a difference in a short time. That's kind of rewarding. It challenges cultural values, especially when you go into a culture that is not like your own. And people come to God, they come to faith. This is both the people you are serving as well as the ones who are serving. But here's a thing I must acknowledge. These provide possibilities, but not guarantees. There is no guarantee. It's kind of like life in some respects. Because this is Sabbath and this is Sabbath school, we have to give some kind of nod to Scripture. So I will be sharing a few biblical passages, but not make this an in-depth Bible study. This is really going to be more about missiology and also about the psychosocial dynamic. And I need to qualify what I mean by psychosocial. Sometimes we just go into the behavioral sciences and kind of do this from a humanistic perspective apart from God. We provide an explanation the best we can from our perspective. I'm not trying to come from that angle. I'm trying to come from the angle that as a follower of God, I believe that my psycho and social dynamics are part of my whole being and therefore part of my relationship with God. So I'm not trying to take this separate from God. I'm trying to take it holistically. So, with that, let me just quickly go through a couple of biblical passages that I'm going to draw upon for the idea of short term missions, starting with Genesis 12, the call of Abram, when God called him from Ur of the Chaldees. The Lord said to Abram, leave your native country, your relatives, your father's family, and go to the land that I will show you. I will make you into a great nation. I will bless you and make you famous, and you will be a blessing to others. I will bless those who bless you and curse those who treat you with contempt. And then here's my key phrase: all the families on earth will be blessed through you. So the idea of the call is to be a blessing to others. Next passage or next verse comes right after the most famous verse of the Bible, John 3:16, God so loved the world. The next verse, verse 17 from the New Living Translation says, God sent his son into the world. I capitalize sent, indicating that God sent Jesus on a mission trip to earth. He would have been much better off, I think, to not have done that, but that was his choice, and Jesus agreed to it, not to judge the world, but to save the world through him. Let's take the example of Jesus when he was on earth. He also sent out the 12, later sending out the 70 or 72, depending on which translation you want. But sending out the 12, Jesus called his 12 disciples to him and gave them authority to drive out impure spirits and to heal disease and sickness. Bjorn, you went on a mission trip with me. Do you remember us empowering you to heal disease and sickness? And to proclaim this message, the kingdom of heaven has come near. Here you go, Bjorn. Heal the sick, raise the dead, cleanse those who have leprosy, drive out demons. Freely you have received, freely give. One translation says, you have received without cost, So give without charge. So that's Jesus sending out the 12 in Matthew 10. We go on to a good Adventist passage, Matthew 24, signs of Christ's return, verse 14. This gospel of the kingdom will be preached in the whole world as a testimony to all nations, and then the end will come. With our Adventist desire for the return of Jesus, we feel compelled to go to all nations and tell them about Jesus and his soon return. And then the final words in Matthew 28, the gospel commission. Jesus came to them, the disciples, and said, all authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Therefore, go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything I've commanded you. And surely I am with you always to the very end of the age. And then we come to the New Testament church in the book of Acts. And it seems like the liveliness of the church moves from Jerusalem up north to Antioch. And there in Antioch, we have the first missionaries being sent out, the first Christian missionaries, if you please. Now, in the church in Antioch, there were prophets and teachers. I'm sure you have both in your church. While they were worshiping the Lord and fasting, some of us are not doing that right now, but anyway, they were worshiping the Lord and fasting. The Holy Spirit said, set apart for me Barnabas and Saul for the work to which I have called them. So after they had fasted and prayed, they placed their hands on them and sent them off, and off they went. So I'm drawing on these just as quick examples of people being sent or going out or going to a different place. I want to shift over to the missiological perspective and just kind of classify missionaries, saying a long-term missionary is someone who's been 5 to 10 years someplace outside of their native country. We have a lot of student missionaries in the Adventist Church, college students who go for 1 year. And then I'm giving reference primarily to the short-term missionaries, people who go for 1 to 3 weeks. I'll be taking a group for 10 days down to Paraguay in June, and that's a short-term mission trip. This is for families. Our youngest will be about 5 years of age, and our oldest will be about 85, and we'll have people all kinds of ages in between. I can tell you that when I talk to people who've been on a short-term mission trip, they see themselves as missionaries. They made a big, big difference in a very short time. But then when I talk to student missionaries, they tell me that short-term missionaries really are more of a waste than a help. They don't really know what it is to be a missionary because they've been for such a short time. They need to go for a full year and understand what it's like to go through the initial wave of euphoria and stuff like that. Get past the culture shock and be a teacher to fourth graders for a few months and now see how wonderful it is. So student missionaries have a tendency to despise short-term missionaries as not being true missionaries. And yet, many of those who are student missionaries had their first taste of this by being short-term missionaries. Then I talk to long-term missionaries, and they tell me student missionaries don't know what they're doing. They've only done it for a year. What do they know? They need to be long-term missionaries, someone who's been there 5 years minimum, like they have. They don't really know what it's like to be to sacrifice and to be committed as short-term missionaries. And as far as short-term missionaries, they're just an embarrassment, and they're a bane. They have no benefit. So I have found that the longer you go, the more you despise those who go short-term. And there are many who only do short-term. So if you're a short-termer only, I just want you to know if you get around a real missionary, you are a waste and an embarrassment to God and to everybody else. I'm kind of poking fun there. Let me try a different classification for mission trips. And I'm going to tell you that, in my opinion, there are 5 basic types. I'm sure we can come up with more, but one type of a mission trip that you go on, and I'm going to refer primarily to short-term missions now, because that'll be our focus now for the rest of this time. One basic type is a preaching or teaching type of short-term mission trip where you go and you hold evangelistic meetings. For some reason, it's more important or more significant when someone from another country comes. It's the idea that if someone comes halfway around the world, this must be special. If they come from across the street, don't waste your time. So I'm involved some with Andrews University. They send out students. They were part of the Papua New Guinea evangelistic effort last year. They send a group down to Cuba. They do evangelistic meetings. They preach, and there's a baptism at the end. A second type is a medical or dental And this is quite common within Adventism, especially because of places like Loma Linda University, that it's quite possible as you're preparing for becoming an MD or a DDS that you have a rotation for 4, 6, 8 weeks in different parts of the world. And I've sometimes been on short-term mission trips, and I come across Loma Linda University graduate students who are there doing part of their training. And so they are doing a short-term mission stint for several weeks in another part of the world, helping people who are underserved. So that's another kind of mission trip. I have friends who are in the medical and dental profession, and they will sometimes do this locally, but they'll also do it internationally. A third one is a construction kind of mission trip where there's a building that is needed, a school, a church, a clinic, what have you. And Maranatha Volunteers International comes to mind right away. That this is kind of their specialty. Their focus is on construction. There may be other things as well, but they're going to construct an urgently needed building somewhere in the world. And my involvement in short-term missions has been primarily through Maranatha. So I have a bias toward this third type of mission trip. The fourth one is children's ministry. Whenever you go to a new culture, especially a simple culture, um, more of a rural area, coming in, you stand out and you're the hottest thing in town. You are the flavor of the month. And so the people who will come to you first will be the children. The people who will come next will be the women, and the last people that will come will be the men. So on a short-term mission trip, some people will focus on the ones who come quickest, which is the children. So they will go someplace and just do a children's ministry. The first time I heard about this, I was shocked to hear that people will pay thousands of dollars to go run a vacation Bible school in some other part of the world. And I think, what in the world are you doing? Why don't you try it in your own neighborhood? Well, because when we do it here, more people come and we get more warm fuzzies, and look how the kids hang on to us. And it's very rewarding. Thank you very much. Now I have to go back home. The fifth kind is an awareness or a promotion. I call this a looky mission trip. This is for the VIPs, and you take them on this trip, and they go and they see the need, and they loosen their wallet, and they donate so others can go. And so that's how you get funding for this. And these people can make a difference with the material prosperity that God has given them. So these are the five basic type that I'm identifying as short-term mission trips. Um, and with that, I'm just going to pause for a moment and just maybe open up for questions before I go into more. Any questions that people want to do right now? I'm scanning over the comments I saw you guys were putting in the chat.
I think I think I've been on all of those types, including the looky ones.
Uh-huh. And what was the impact for you? Did it vary or was it consistent?
No, I think as time went on, Steve, I became more wary about my presence there. Somewhat, I started out feeling like I was getting a lot and giving, and thought I was giving a lot. As time went on, in the different, and I've been on several construction trips too. As time went on, I became uh, less pleased with what we were doing for a variety of reasons that we can talk about as we go along. I felt like we were no longer contributing very much, and probably not mixing very well too. So
Thank you.
Can I come in with a comment on that one as well?
Sure.
So like I think there's a big difference between like because I definitely have felt what Lauren has felt, and some of the critiques there that you mentioned, Steve, I resonate with. I think though that it's an entirely different experience being a kid on one of those trips, and so going at a young age, yeah, so it's not the most financially efficient way of doing things. It'd be better to hire people locally, but like what you said about it changes participants. It sounds cheesy, but it plants a seed at an early age that kind of stays with you, and it's highly imperfect, and there's all kinds of stuff that goes wrong and whatever. But I don't know. I think it's, I mean, if the alternative is a ski trip somewhere, you're going to spend the money. Hey, you're doing something good and you're bringing teens. I think it's good. Anyway.
All right.
Yeah, and let me add one too, if I might, Steve.
Sure.
My
Sure.
wife, we are part of a blended family of international people who've met each other and married, and now we have grandkids. And when my wife went with our son-in-law to Mexico, in rural Mexico, they went to their local church. It was a good Baptist church. They were told by the Baptist church that their Baptist church had sent a mission group to America and wondered how they'd been received. I thought that was always intriguing, that we think that we need to give something to them, and yet they're giving to us too. So maybe it's a mutual exchange. What do you think?
The current mission field is North America and Western Europe, and others are coming to this area now, but the reception is usually not nearly as gratifying as going the other direction. And part of the reason is we don't feel the same kind of need that other people feel. Stephen, I see your hand.
Yes, a common criticism I've heard is that we travel to these countries and build a building that the locals cannot afford to build, and then leave them with a building that they cannot afford to maintain. Could you speak to that?
Sure, I'll do that briefly. One of the reasons I go with Maranatha is that there is a follow through with Maranatha to complete the building, because a lot of times you go on and do one of these construction projects, you don't finish the building. I've done that. And we've left money with the people to finish the building. We go back home and tell the wonderful stories of what we have done, have no more contact with those people. I have had an opportunity to go back to some of those places, and the building was not completed because one of the church members had a medical emergency and they used the money to save her life. And now they're left with a half-finished building, which is kind of like a white elephant in the community, which gives a testimony to the community that the Adventists do things halfway. As a North American, I had no awareness of that. We thought we had done help for them, but we ended up making them look embarrassing to the other people. I'll come back to Maranatha. When they do these buildings, they do it in conjunction with church leaders at the local level, also at the conference level, and at the union level. So there is an ongoing maintenance of those. And what typically happens with the Maranatha churches is in about 5 to 10 years, they're asked to come back because more churches have been birthed from that and they need more buildings. It is true that we tend to go, how can I say this? We tend to convert people who are on the lower socioeconomic level of society. And so when they come to the Adventist church and join the Adventist church, as the poorest people in the community, they often do not have the financial resources to build a building. So they will worship under a tree, they'll worship in a shack, they'll worship in some boards that are put together with baling wire, and that's all they have. And for a relatively small amount of money from an American perspective, you can build a decent building for them. And it's a building that takes little maintenance. And so they are sustained for quite some time. Adventism also tends to teach good living habits. And so often the people develop a better socioeconomic status because of the habits that are promoted by Adventism. And they're able to do that. And they often will help to plant another church. I've seen them tear down the churches that are made out of baling wire, and they have a new church, but they'll take that baling wire and the boards and go someplace else and erect a new one and plant a new church, and they tend to grow. And that's quite a contrast to what we have in North America, where almost any Adventist church you go to today, have no problem finding a seat. In these other churches, they stop because there's no more seating. You may remember the movie, what was it? The baseball movie, If You Build It, They Will Come. And so that was build a baseball diamond type of thing, and the fans will show up. Maranatha finds that with their request, if you go and build a building, it will fill up with people. And so I'm left asking, why do we spend money on evangelistic meetings in this country? Why don't we take that money and just build a building in a place where if you build it, they will come? But a quick answer to your question, Stephen, about building a building and leave it where they can't maintain it. The buildings that I have seen are easily maintained. There's not much to them to keep them maintained. Let me give my testimony about how I got involved in short-term missions. As a college student at Pacific Union College, I saw student missionaries as people who didn't know what their lives were about, and they were taking some major in college, and they were kind of trying to find their way. And so they went off for a year to try to find out what life was about. I had a double major. I did not have time to waste going as a year as a student missionary. I had to get done with college. And as an Adventist, I knew Jesus was coming soon. So the faster I finished college, the more I could be of benefit to him. So I had no interest whatsoever in being a student missionary. It never crossed my mind as a possibility. Um, my last 2 years at college, I had an opportunity to work with the new youth pastor at PUC. And this was back in the early 70s before mission trips were the thing to do in youth ministry. Um, and we found out, or he came up with this idea because there were some physicians at St. Helena Hospital who had little private planes, and he found out about a self-supporting school in Tesapaco, Mexico, and they had a little clinic there that needed some work done. And so we were going to go down and do some basic repairs on the clinic to make it more usable for American doctors who would fly down there maybe once a month. And they would serve the community and the students at the school. So he started making plans for this. He took me as his student worker with him, and we did a site visit, flew down there to this remote area of Mexico. And it was a culture shock for me. My eyes were just wide open. I cannot believe people actually live like this. The poverty was something I wasn't accustomed to as a middle-class American. So we came back, and the conference told us we could not go on the mission trip. Again, this is before mission trips were a hot thing. And the reason given was because it's insurance. That's always the reason you can't do something in youth ministry is insurance. And so I thought we couldn't do it. I didn't realize that this youth pastor took that as fuel on the fire. And so it meant we were definitely going. So we went on down, and the youth pastor was in a plane that was a twin engine. And it turns out the twin engine plane could not land on the short dirt strip. So he had to land someplace else. And I landed with the rest of the youth. So here I am with the whole youth group without the youth pastor. So everybody turned to me and said, "You're his assistant. What are we supposed to do? And besides, you came down here on the site visit, so you've been here before." In my mind, I thought, this youth pastor is wanting to see if I have what it takes. I want to rise to the challenge. So I said, "Well, it's almost dark here. Let's get some food, and we need to bed down for the night." This is before cell phones and things like that. We didn't know where the youth pastor was. And as we bedded down, we were sleeping on hard cement floors. I had not slept on a hard cement floor before. So we began to cry and moan and complain. What are we doing here? We came to help these people, and this is the thanks that we get. They make us sleep on cement floors. And our cries that must have gone to heaven, and God answered a prayer, because in about 10 minutes, mattresses started showing up. I'm calling them mattresses. They were those, the 4-inch kind, that you can hardly tell you're on a mattress. You really had to have at least 2 of them to do any good. And because I was the leader of the group, I took 3. I figured that leaders get more. So I had my 3 and everybody else had 2. And we're here to help these people. So somebody raised the odd question, where did these come from? That was not my question at all. My question was, why weren't these waiting for us when we got here? But my question did not win out. Instead, the question that won out was, where did these come from? And you probably know where they came from. They came from the people at the school, in the community, who were doing whatever they could for the rich Americans who had just showed up. So what's the next question? If we have their mattresses, what are they sleeping on? And I'm happy to tell you they were not sleeping on cement floors like we were. They were sleeping on dirt floors. And here's your $10,000 investment. for the first time in my life, I was able to look into a mirror put up in front of me to see how absolutely selfish I am. People have told me that. I had heard the words, but it had not hit my heart like it did at that moment. And it was ugly. What I saw was ugly. And this was much like say, a transformational moment in my life. Someone who didn't want to go on the mission trip, but was forced to keep his job. And now I see that as a theology major, I'm one of the most selfish people in the world. Again, I don't know what kind of price tag you put on that, but that had a profound impact on me. And I've been doing mission trips ever since. I'll contrast that with the second year that I went on a mission trip. I was still at Pacific Union College working for the same youth pastor. We took another group of kids, and because it was so successful the previous year, we said, let's go back to the same place. Makes sense, doesn't it? We were going to do some kind of construction project for the school now instead of the clinic next door to the school. But at the last minute, things fell through. And what were we supposed to do? And so just what shall I say, with nothing else to do, we ended up going to Holbrook Indian Mission in Holbrook, Arizona. We were in Northern California. Instead of going by little planes, we took vans and we went down to the Holbrook Indian School. The project we had was to work on building a house for a white faculty member. You need to understand some of the cultural and ethnic dynamics that were going on. We were a bunch of white teenagers coming from Northern California to build a house for a white teacher at an Indian mission school. We went there, we showed up, we said, we're here. Last year, everybody liked us. They gave us pats on the back. So go ahead and start patting us on the back. Those were not our words, but those were our actions and those were our expectations. The Indian students were not patting us on the back because we were building another white person's house. And one morning, some of our youth were digging a ditch that was going to be a water line, and they dug about 100 yards before lunch. And then we went in for lunch and had lunch. We came back out, and the water line had been filled in. The dirt was put back in. And we thought, who in the world put this in? We have not put in the pipes or anything. Well, it's easier to dig it out the second time because the dirt was loose. So we dug it out and we dug some more. The next morning when we came back to finish the job, the whole line had been filled in again. And we ended up having some strong feelings going on between our nice white kids and these Indian students. Apparently, they didn't know we had come to help them. We tried to tell them as best they could, but they didn't hear very well, apparently. Also, it was springtime of the year in Northern California. It's still cold in the springtime. Holbrook Indian School is in Arizona. So we took our shorts and our short sleeve t-shirts to get a tan for the Lord. And we did not realize that Holbrook is up at a high elevation and it snowed while we were there. This was not the kind of mission trip we were expecting. This was harsh and cruel, and we were here for accolades. We ended up leaving early. There was such animosity that was building between the missionaries and the people who lived there. And so we left in the cover of night and ran away from the place. Came back to the border with California. Some of you have heard of the town of Needles, California. Sometimes it's the hottest spot in the country on any given day. And we had extra time, so we spent a whole day there just lying in the sun trying to get the snow and crust off of us. And the youth pastor did a magnificent job in debriefing us. After we had finally warmed up, he got us together and said, well, let's talk about the mission trip, shall we? And he had us use a color to describe our mission trip experience. And I can tell you the most common color was brown. And he would say, well, why brown? And he said, we would say, dirt. Dirt is brown. They treat us like dirt. That's what they did. I mean, we sacrificed to come down and help these people, and they treat us like dirt. And he said, well, why did you go? Did you go there for people to pat you on the back? Um, Jesus? What about Jesus? We went to take Jesus to them. So did you do that? Well, they wouldn't listen. They never listened to anything we said. I mean, they do you know how bad they were? And off we would go. And he kept coming back to, and why did you go? Why did you go? And finally, we had to admit we went there for positive affirmation. And if we don't get positive affirmation, we're not going to help anybody. And again, the mirror was put up in front of me. You can tell me that in words, but when I've just been through it, it hits deeper. And that was just as pivotal for me as the first one where we had all the accolades. So as a youth pastor, I have found that taking my kids on a short-term mission trip will result in more spiritual growth for them than 1 year's worth of Sabbath schools. I'm not opposed to Sabbath school. I still promote Sabbath school. I write resources for Sabbath school. But there's more of an impact in 10 to 14 days on a short-term mission trip than 52 Sabbaths of 1 hour a week. And so I didn't stop doing Sabbath schools, but I knew I had to do short-term mission trips. Linda, go ahead.
Steve, I do appreciate the candor of what and the self-effacing comments that you make. I just feel like I need to say one or two things, having been actually on faculty at the Holbrook Indian School for a couple of years. I suspect it was before you were there, but I feel like I need to just add a couple of editorial comments that might ease the picture a little bit. It was, I would say, first of all, while there were many groups that came to Holbrook and did wonderful things and were always very much appreciated, I'm surprised at the response that you had. And it really makes me curious about why you felt that the Indian students were not receptive. It makes me wonder if perhaps the students in your group had not been led to understand and appreciate the dignity of the Navajo and Hopi. And there were a number of Sioux kids and a few Apaches that we had at the school. They are people that live in dignity and honor. And if somebody goes there with the expectation that you're going to set them on the right path, then I think you all probably had faulty expectations to begin with when you went there. I would also like to say that when I was there, which was really a long time ago, all of the faculty were white people. Okay, there were a few. There are some today who are Native Americans, but the faculty that lived there, Steve, I got to tell you, people didn't go there because it was a cool place to go. It was my husband and I went there because he didn't get a teaching job anyplace else, and we were expecting our first child, and so we went there. Because it was the only option that we had, because we both went to La Sierra, and so that was sort of our orbit as well. But I have to tell you that the buildings at that time were all World War II era, and while the teachers and faculty may have been white, they didn't really have decent places to live. And so I felt like the way you characterized things was just, at least in terms of my own experience, just a little bit off-putting. The thing that we found being there is that, and some people probably don't know this, but at that time, the Bureau of Indian Affairs, the federal organization, federal department, had a rule that if a parent, a Navajo parent or a Hopi parent, worked at any BIA school on the reservation, they could be a cook, they could be a teacher, a janitor, it didn't matter what. But if a parent worked at one of the BIA schools, which was one of the few sources of employment on the reservation, none of their children could attend that school. And so the kids at Holbrook are kids that can't live at home so that their parents can have a job. And so there's so many more layers of nuance and cultural delineations, you know. And I know you were trying probably to make your story short, and I've probably spoken too long. But the faculty that go to Holbrook, in my experience at least, and having been involved with the school to some extent since then, are people who are really dedicated. They are people who are willing to give up creature comforts in order to be there and to provide, not so much to convert these young people, but to provide them with shelter, with a decent education, hopefully with vocational tools, because most of them ultimately do not leave the reservation, and do so with a great sense of dedication. And I'm really surprised at the unfavorable reception you received, because based on so many groups that came through in the few years that I lived there, I never ever saw that happen. So I'm deeply saddened that you had that experience. I just want you to know it was, in my experience, it was not typical.
Thank you, Linda. And I want to apologize if I made it sound as though the Navajo Indian School was a mean group of people. I would say the reason that things happened the way I described them was because the people, including me, who brought the youth, did not prepare the youth appropriately. We went there expecting people to come up and hug us like the stories we had heard the previous year. And if they didn't respond that way, we demonized them.
Hmm.
We came there simply to have them pat us on the back. We didn't come there to really be of any service to them. We had no awareness of Navajo culture, Navajo values, Navajo history. We just came there as the do-gooders to be patted on the back. And so we set ourselves up for failure and also disengagement. And if you don't meet what our needs are, then we're going to write you off. So if anything, it's an indication that on short-term missions, there's a need to prepare the volunteers who are going, because otherwise you can do more harm than you can do good. And so thank you for bringing that out. I'm going to shift over to the Bane part of short-term missions and see if I can get that part to come back on screen. There, we back on.
Mhm.
Okay. In the medical field, you're familiar with the Hippocratic Oath. It's actually quite long. We have shortened it, even though this is not part of the Hippocratic Oath, but basically we summarize it as do no harm. So people in the medical profession are supposed to, when they help somebody, first of all, don't harm them. It is possible, even when you're intending to help, to actually do harm. And here are a couple of books from about a decade ago. When Helping Hurts, How to Alleviate Poverty Without Hurting the Poor and Yourself. And this has more of an international flavor to it. The one on the right, Toxic Charity, has more to do with what happens in America, what people are trying to help out in impoverished areas. And it's called Toxic Charity and How to Reverse It. So it's quite possible that in trying to do good, you actually do harm. And I think that's what we did on that second mission trip that I was talking about. I think we hurt the Indians, and I think we hurt ourselves. I think we hurt everybody in the process. Um, from the book When Helping Hurts, the one on the left, the authors provide an equation of hurt. There are 4 parts to this equation. The first part is that poverty is defined as not having money. So poverty has to do with materialism and a lack thereof. Westerners tend to define poverty as a lack of money, a lack of wealth, a lack of stuff. If you take that understanding of poverty, you don't have much stuff, and then you add to that people who have a God complex, if they do have money. So let's say that I'm the person who doesn't have much money, and you're the person who has more money than I do. So when we team up together, you're in the superior role, you're in the God role, you're the one who can help me because I don't have stuff and you do. As soon as you give me something, you have the power position because this is excess for you, whereas it's necessity for me. We are setting up an equation for hurt. It's going to make you feel like God, and it's going to make me feel like trash. Now let's add something more to this. If I don't have money, I can easily feel inferior, especially when I put next to you. I don't measure up. So when I see this contrast, I feel inferior, and then you come on as God without even realizing you're coming on as God. You're just there to help me. My feelings about myself go from being okay to feeling inferior. And now the result is, well, it hurts me and it hurts you. So this is their equation. You can see how this can happen in a short-term mission trip. People who are able to fly to another part of the world must have some kind of money, who are able to pay not only for the airfare, but also the transportation and the food and the lodging when they are there, to pay for buildings or medicines or whatever it is, the evangelistic meeting setup. They're able to do all of that. And the poor people come to this and they want a piece of the action. But they know there's no way they're going to fly to America. There's no way that they're going to be able to put on an evangelist series on their own. There's no way they're going to be able to build a building of their own. And so they feel inferior. And so we leave with the North Americans feeling very godly, in fact, to the point of feeling like they are God, whether they name it or not, and the other people feeling more disempowered because they thought they were fine until the Americans came along and built this building, and now you need to build buildings just like this. Bye, we'll see you next year, maybe, maybe not. We can change this equation. One of the ways of changing it is to redefine poverty. Instead of defining poverty in material terms, we can talk about poverty of spirituality. We can talk about poverty of community. We can talk about poverty of meaning in life. But Westerners tend to define poverty in terms of dollars and cents. It's quite possible to have a lot of dollars and cents, but to be spiritually poor. It's quite possible to be wealthy in terms of monetary terms, and yet not be part of a community and feel very lonely and isolated. So it depends on how you define poverty. I'm suggesting, as these authors do, that we change poverty from being defined solely as dollars and cents, but poverty in all areas of life. And I'm going to go back to the fall of humanity and that we are all broken. So just as a financially wealthy American, in contrast to a relatively poor Venezuelan, together we're broken. Together we're in need of healing. Together we're in need of salvation. Instead of me being the one who is relatively rich, especially when I compare myself to many people in other parts of the world. A second way to change the equation is to see the value of the poor. They are not simply objects that need financial help. In fact, a common thing I see when I'm with people on short-term mission trips, especially if we get to the rural areas where things seem more simple, and Americans would call them poor, the reaction from the Americans of the first 2 or 3 days is, "Oh, I feel so sorry for these people. How do they survive? I mean, they live in shacks. It's dirt floor, dirt walls. They don't even have electricity or running water. I could never live like this. Forget the hot water. They don't have any water at all. They have to go and get it someplace. I just have a lot of pity for these people." And then after 2 or 3 days, we start seeing that they have a community among them and a trust in God that we don't have. And we want that. So we start asking, how much does it cost to get what they have? I have money compared to them. They have community and a faith that I don't have. Where do I buy it? And the answer is you don't. You don't. So it turns out that the poor people have a greater dependence on God than you do. The poor people have more interdependence than we North Americans do, because we tend to operate on our own in responsible ways without relying on one another. I was back in that town of Tesapaku a few years later, and there was a lady there who spoke both English and Spanish. I don't speak Spanish because I'm a lazy American. And she said to me, we couldn't make it if God didn't intervene in our lives on a daily basis. And I quietly nodded my head. I mean, it was obvious. They were living hand to mouth, if that. And she said, "But I feel sorry for you guys." And I was shocked. "What do you mean you feel sorry for us? We're the ones that are here to help you, and you feel sorry for us?" And so I said, "Why in the world do you feel sorry for us?" And she said, "Well, here's the reason why. You guys need God as much as we do, but none of you know it." And Ugh, she may as well just give me a sucker punch to the gut. I remember it vividly as though she was saying it today. And she was right. We say we need God, but we don't really sense that we need God because we're responsible Americans. We take care of ourselves. And these people who we considered poor had a more vital connection with God than we did, and we were jealous of them. To see value in the poor by not measuring them with our old definition of how much money do you have. And then here's again for North Americans, we need to repent of our pride. And one of the hardest things with pride is we're usually blind to our own pride. And when you see something like this, it puts that mirror in front of you like it has done for me multiple times. Some people need to go on one mission trip just to have this reorientation. I find that I slip back to my North American culture. So I have to keep going back and be renewed for selfish reasons so I can get reoriented as to what is really important in life. Okay, what about the cost? I'm holding in my hands right now a letter that my wife and I received yesterday from a 15-year-old who goes to our church. He's asking for money to go on a mission trip. $1,100 for him to go for 10 days on a mission trip. $1,100. And the airlines is going to get $2,600. So he's wanting to raise $3,600 to go for 10 days to see Iguazu Falls in Brazil. Really? Just send them the money. And when people tell me that, here is my response. I have the opportunity to go to these places multiple times every year. I will hand deliver the money you want to donate. How much will you give me? And so far, I've had one person who has given me $100, and everybody else has just gone quiet. So they criticize sending the money, but they aren't willing to give even $5 themselves. I can tell you that we're going to give this kid some money, not because of me, but because of my wife. She's kind, I'm not. We'll give this kid money, even though he comes from a good family. He has two older brothers. One's at Walla Walla. The other one is the Student Association president of the Adventist Academy. And this kid is a freshman. And he says, I went with my family in 2017 when he was 7 years old. Even at a young age, it impacted me greatly and it made me want to serve more. It really changed my life. I'm hoping to gain that kind of perspective again. I'm sending you this letter as a request for your support in two areas. The first one is to pray for me. And the second one is that my attitude and service will be pleasing to God and sensitive to the people and the culture in this particular area that he's going to. Well, I know his parents, they helped him write the letter. So how cynical do I need to be? What's going to happen to the kid? I don't know. But I do know that this criticism, how much would I pay for the experience that I've had? And furthermore, if you send the money to the people, what will they do? I can tell you that going to the place where you serve makes a difference for the people. How does it make a difference? Well, let me give you this analogy. If I were to come to your house for lunch today, would you do things any differently? Would you prepare food that maybe you didn't prepare? Would you set the table in a way differently than if you didn't have visitors coming? When North Americans go to some of these parts in the world, it changes how they relate to life. In some of these places, the Adventist is a group of 5 or 10 old ladies, and that is the Adventist church. They are mocked in the village or the town because it's just a bunch of old ladies, and that's it. I'm not demeaning old ladies. I'm just saying the rest of the town doesn't see it being for them. And when 30 or 40 people from another country come and build a church, all of a sudden these ladies have stature. They're part of something much bigger than just 3 or 4 ladies. They're part of an international church organization. And they feel connected too in ways they never felt before. They may have seen pictures, but it never affected their lives dramatically. I can show you pictures of mission trips, but it's not the same as if you go there either. So the experience itself has a transforming effect both on those who go as well as those who are there receiving it. Can it go bad? Absolutely can go bad. Does it have to? No. And it's a risk. It's a risk. So I keep taking these risks because I think it's worth it. I will tell you that Calvin College, now Calvin University in Grand Rapids, Michigan, did some research on people who go on short-term missions to show that it's a short-term experience. That is, a year later, people are no different. So we made all this investment, and what's the long-term benefit? See, it didn't happen. And I have tried to do some research on that the last 2 years, and I've taken people on a Maranatha project and given them a pre-test when they first arrive and a post-test just when they leave. The response rate is phenomenal because they do it before they go through line for food. So everybody does it. Then I tell them in 6 months, I'm going to send you a similar survey to see what the 6 month residual is. And I want to show that this does make a difference long term. We get so few responses back in 6 months that we've not been able to have anything to do the analysis, which indicates that 6 months later, they're not thinking about it anymore. They've gone on. Having said that, my wife just told me this morning that a person that we helped sponsor on another mission trip, she had little connection to the church, but she wanted to go to Peru. She went. She had a transformative experience, and now she's back here finishing college, and she has changed her goals that she wants to go back to Peru and serve there once she finishes college. So that's an isolated incident. Well, it happens here and there. So I will go back and just say what I think are the main reasons for the benefit of short-term mission trips, and they are the new intense opportunities. It makes an obvious difference, challenges our cultural values, and people come to God or faith. Is it guaranteed? No, it has possibilities. Okay, well, I went more than my 20 or 25 minutes. Let's go ahead and open it up.
Ray and Bobby, I appreciate your thoughts about this, and I'd ask you to unmute and share with the rest of us. Let's see if we can make that happen. There you go.
Well, the thought came to mind. If you go through the New Testament there and you look at the stories and the observations of what Christ was doing, he started off always by noticing and looking at what people needed. In other words, he didn't go about, as what we have come to think, tell them. It was an observational thing. If you really look at those stories, it was an observational thing. What does this person need in their life? And if you think, to me, when I look at and I think of missions growing up, what was the picture in your mind? Somebody holding up a scroll, telling people what they needed. You never heard about the mission being a project of going there and helping people. What do they need? Now, I find that more today, you hear stories of what you would say semi-spiritual people who look for ways to actually help the individual where they are at. So when he talks about these mission trips, I understood what he was saying right away when he talked about how they looked at the people where they went when they went to, say, like Holbrook, because the American way, and I don't know anything about European, but the American way is to tell people what you need. And our religion is based around that. Tell. And that's the way we've interpreted everything. Tell them what they need. And we come across as being superior, more knowledgeable, and less helpful. Even today, watching television shows that are based out of countries like Britain, Australia, or wherever. And it's interesting to see when Americans go there, they're looking for a home or a place to stay. The complaints are always, but, of course it's not like home. Why would you expect everybody to be like America? Well, I think that impacts the way we see other people because working in the radiology business and seeing patients come to our clinic for exams, one of the things that was always mentioned in just talking with them is how selfish Americans are in their view as compared to what they went through life with and what we have. And I think as some of those old time movies is like called The Selfish American, or basically about how we seem to project what our attitudes are onto other people as if they need that. So I think as a church, I wonder if we ever started off missions correctly because we went to this, tell everybody God's coming soon. Well, if you haven't got anything to eat, what the heck does that mean? Maybe you should feed them or whatever is needed. Anyway, that's it.
Ray, I think you're spot on. I think you're spot on. I can tell you with the Maranatha projects that I go on, the people have asked for a building. And when you take the North American perspective of we're going to take Jesus to them, it turns out we're not taking Jesus to them. Jesus is already there. We're simply going to catch up to Jesus. The fact that they need a church indicates that Jesus is already there. So we really aren't taking Jesus to them. Just the opposite happens. We see Jesus in new ways by going there to help them. I can tell you that when I do the site visits and I say, because this is a Maranatha project, there's going to be construction of the building that you requested, but we'll have other people who are not skilled in this area. Is there something else that we can do to help spread your influence here in the community? We're going to be here for a very short time. Most of us do not speak your language. Is there something we can do? And I'll suggest something like maybe we should paint a community hall. Maybe there's some area of the town that needs garbage picked up. Is there something that we can do to be of service to your community for the short time that we are here to extend what you are already doing? And their most common request, first of all, they're shocked. But then their most common request is medical. So we do simple medical and dental clinics, very simple ones. There are others that are more set up to do that. We'll do that. They want something for children. Sometimes they want trees planted or something that is, what should you say, of a nursery nature. So we do those kinds of things based upon their suggestions, but usually they've never thought beyond what you were saying, Ray. Well, should we get more Bible studies? Should we hold evangelistic meetings? And I tell them we don't have much to offer for that because our evangelism is much slower than yours. So we can slow you down, but we really can't help you out. So if you want us to slow you down, then we'll do an evangelistic series. We have a kind of a freak element in that we are from outside the country. So people want to come and see the freak show. They want to have contact with the North Americans. So we tell them, let's use that to your advantage and do something that will draw the people to the church. And then you do your evangelistic meetings after we leave when the people have already been drawn to your church. So that's our suggestion, rather than having us do it and get pictures to go back and say, you know what, you North Americans aren't being baptized, but I'm a great preacher. Look what happened when I went to such and such a country. We're back to the ego again. And it really should not be about that. Who's next?
Good response. Carolyn, you're up.
Hi there.
Hi.
I wanted to applaud everything that Steve has shared today. It really hit my heart. And I want to thank Linda for her input about her experience. I haven't been down there and I haven't done a short-term mission trip, unless you count the week I spent in Belize at a mission as an adult. But I did work for 5.5 years on a reservation in North America, in North Dakota for 5 years. And part of the next year was in South Dakota. And you are spot on. We have to, I believe my experience taught me very quickly. You know, I married this man here in North Dakota 47 years ago. And I said, I want to be a missionary. I've always wanted to be a missionary. and he said, go 3 miles east, because the Henderson Ranch borders a reservation. And he said, that's the greatest mission field you'll ever find. Well, fast forward about 25 years, 25, 30 years, I ended up plunked down working for Indian Health Service. And I learned very quickly that the best thing I could do was to say, can you teach me? Can you show me? Can you tell me how you do this? And I just went in as a learner. And one of the most honoring things I ever had happen was on a Sunday afternoon, I got a phone call from somebody saying, we just had a suicide. Do you know this family? And I said, no, I don't. I was the mental health director, but I hadn't worked with that family. Well, they had just found their boy dead in the bedroom the night before. And I said, what can I do? And she, what are you doing? I said, I'm baking bread. And she said, get a pan of your buns. I'll meet you at their house. I took the buns to that house that night, and I had someone that taught me what to do. She told me, you come in the house with me with your buns. I'll take them to the kitchen. And then she walked me through the evening. I didn't say anything to anybody until I was approached. They brought me a plate of food. I didn't know what it was, but believe me, I ate some. When it was time, she said, okay, now go talk to the dad. And the room was packed full in this small living room with mourners that were there to be with the family. And now it was my turn to go talk to the dad, who was sitting in his recliner, tears just streaming down his face. And I knelt on the floor in front of him, told him who I was, and I wanted to help in any way I could. A few weeks later, he and his wife asked me to be a part of talking to other youth at the school so that we could prevent more suicides, hopefully.
Wow.
And a year later, the gal that had called me and told me that there had been this suicide said to me, are you done working for the day? And I said, yes. And she said, come with me. We're going to the powwow grounds. We went over to the powwow grounds. I didn't know why, but you don't always ask. And they were having a giveaway at the 1-year anniversary of his death, which is cultural. That's what they do in these tribes. And we were sitting there listening, and pretty soon they called my name, and they had me come forward, and they gifted me a star quilt because I had done something so simple as a pan of buns. But some of the most powerful spiritual experiences I have been in a sweat in the middle of the reservation. The prayers were so spiritual and meaningful. Anyway, I just wanted to say thank you, that I think we have to go in as learners.
Carolyn, you're describing a radically different attitude than what I had for myself.
And I
it
think
makes all the difference in the world.
Well, and what you described, though, what you learned is what we have to keep teaching, I think.
Yes, yes. And how that plays out, whether it's buns, a ministry of presence, that makes all the difference in the world. And so I think for those who do short-term missions, it behooves us to prepare people to go with that attitude rather than being the great resource, the great God who's doing it all for them. It's just backwards. It's backwards.
Yeah,
Thank you.
and their spirituality is so deep and real. So much we can learn.
Yeah. You mentioned you can find it right in your own community. You don't have to go halfway around the world to find it. There are some people who don't see it in their community until they go halfway around the world. And sometimes when they come back, they get involved locally, and sometimes they don't. They go back to being who they were.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. We go back to our comfort zone, don't we?
It's easy to do that. It's easy to do that. I'm not sure who's next.
Thank you, Carolyn. I love that. Bjorn, where's this taking you?
Well, okay, so I'm a missionary kid. Before, and you guys know that. Before I get to my perspective, which is not American, my promised commercial here, we can do this kind of thing. We can have these conversations and have AT and ATSS because of the way you guys support what we do here, and also the magazine and the website and everything through our fundraisers. So I'm very grateful for your support. I'm going to post a link for how you can give online to the fundraiser, the spring fundraiser for Adventist Today. So thank you for indulging me there and for supporting. I know several of the people here that give, and that is just very, very appreciated. With that out of the way, I kept on hearing the perspective of sort of American short-term missionaries in different posts and how that's seen. And I mean, I grew up on missionary campuses around the world, and in the 80s, especially when there was a huge power and wealth discrepancy between the US and everywhere else, some of those dynamics that you mentioned were more apparent, where there was a very large wealth and power discrepancy, and sometimes missionaries seemed like they were lording it over others. But I feel like the dynamic has changed now, and I think that makes these kinds of visits even more important, because it goes both ways. I mean, you have kids from Brazil coming to England doing mission work. You have or to the U.S. and vice versa, and it gives a much broader perspective to teenagers that I think is very, very important. And so, I mean, it's very easy to be cynical about short-term missions like I said, from a financial point of view, or from, the efficiency of the work. If you're just thinking, like a trained construction team versus kids. But I'm a huge believer in how it expands horizons and how it changes hearts. And also from the recipient's point of view, I remember being in Peru, and something had been recently constructed. And I remember a mother talking about it. She said, yeah, these wonderful kids came over from the US and they built this for us. And so there was a real sense of gratitude. It wasn't a case of all these spoiled children came over and didn't do any work. Half of them were sitting beside, the construction site, or maybe someone had a fight or whatever. No, it was real gratitude. So I don't know. I push back on a lot of the critiques, because I feel like I've been on the ground level, and I experienced it as a kid, and I've seen how it's transformed kids' lives, and also the communities that are on the receiving end. So, yeah, I just want to thank you, Steve. I feel like you've more than anyone I know. I mean, you've really championed this kind of thing for kids around the world, and it's changed a lot of lives. And you probably don't hear enough stories about what an impression it made, but it made an impression on me and many people that went out with me on your trip. So, thank you.
Hallelujah.
Lauren, it's time for you. Let's see if we can get you unmuted. There you go. Oh, I think you just put it back the other way, or I did.
There
you go. You're on.
You muted me. All right, I'm on. Yeah, Steve, I've had a range of experiences in these trips. Some where I'm kind of embarrassed for my behavior, like you spoke of. Some where I really felt like I did not understand the culture, and like my arm was being twisted behind my back to give something and do something. The looky trips, you called it. That was uncomfortable too. I'll contrast two of them. I know a church that I went on a trip with. I won't tell you where it's at, but it's a church full of construction people. And they do these trips all the time. And it's always, they don't really mix with the people. It's always kind of a bro event. All these construction guys going down there, and we're going to go and build them a church and everything. And I remember I went with them one time, and the attitude, the people came, and some of the people came. And oh, by the way, this was in an area where in Central America, where there are a lot of indigenous people, so some who didn't even speak Spanish, but they came and said, "We'd like to do a meal for you." And the folks in the group said, "No, we can't do that." And I said, "Why not?" And they said, "We don't know what they're going to cook with. We don't know. Their houses may be absolutely filthy. We can't eat there." So they cooked it in the $400,000 motorhome that one of the guys had driven down into Mexico there. This was not a comfortable mission trip for me in lots of ways. I don't know if I behaved myself badly, but I certainly was embarrassed for the group. But they loved it. I mean, like I said, it was a bro event. All the construction guys going down there and whipping out this church, and wasn't this great? But then there's another picture that I've picked up from some people, and you've probably run into this too, particularly when we would go down to the indigenous people. And I've made several trips out into the Sierra Huichol and the Sierra Tarahumara. And the attitude was, why are you going to these people and bothering them? You know, these are the noble savages. These people, they've got a way of life. It's a beautiful, perfect way of life. And you're going in there as Christians and you're bringing all these ideas to them. And you should just let these people be what they are, where they are. Um, what my response was, yeah, but Coca-Cola made it here. They haven't been holding back. Corona made it here. They haven't been holding back. Even the cell phone companies have made it here. They haven't been holding back, but we're supposed to hold back. We're supposed to not bother them with Western Christian culture because they're the noble savages and they're beautiful and perfect just the way they are. Um, so I don't know. Those are just my reflections, Steve, and you've probably heard all of those. You've probably seen all of those in your time. In between, I've had some that I think probably my first trip with my friend Karen Katoski down to the Sierra Huichol was the most consequential for me personally. It was my first experience of culture shock in a good way. But I've had, but the others, ever since then, I think I've been less comfortable in doing that. Do you know what I'm saying?
I'm not surprised to hear that, Lauren. You're a very reflective person. And so you're going to start noticing those kinds of things and asking those questions of yourself and of others. You mentioned that the first trip you went on was the most consequential, and
Yeah.
I would call it a virgin experience. Most people suffer on their second mission trip because they expect it to be a replication of their first one. And
Hmm.
I will sometimes have a group that ask all those who have been on more than one mission trip to stand up at the very start of the project. And they're standing. I say, now, if you've been on more than one, how many of you found that the second one was just like the first one? If so, keep standing, otherwise sit down. And everybody sits down.
Hmm.
You never have, even if you have the same people going to the same place, it's going to be different. And so this expectation of this new experience is not going to be there. I've
Yeah.
had teenagers, Bjorn, who've come to me and have said, okay, it hasn't happened to me yet. I came last year and it happened. And now we're halfway through the project and it hasn't happened. Hit me with Jesus. Hit me with Jesus. Come on, I need to feel it. And they're looking for a repeat of that first time experience. And that's not the spiritual walk.
Right.
We're like surfers riding another wave and another wave, and they come and they go. And so, yeah, that's true. You asked about the bros, or you mentioned the construction guys who went down there and had their time. I have found that in the Adventist church, the the professions that are honored are pastor, physician, nurse, something in the medical field, teachers. These are the honored people. Construction workers, well, they can be deacons at church, I suppose, fix the plumbing, but they really don't count. They don't make enough money and they're not educated enough, so they really don't count. There's this kind of hierarchy that is set there. And
Hmm.
on a mission trip, all of a sudden, these construction people they're the heroes, they're the stars, they're the
Yeah.
ones that make it happen. And they feel like they're actually contributing something to God and his kingdom. Whereas back home, they don't feel like what they're doing matters nearly as much because they're second class. So I can see why they could go and feel good about it with each other. Like, look, we cranked out another building. We did it faster than last time. Success.
Yeah.
No, that's not the success we're looking for. We're looking for something much deeper. And to miss out the opportunity with the nationals, that would be the next area of growth. But it's easier to stay in our comfort zones, as you indicated. And I like your comment about why should we bother these people? Well, Coca-Cola
No,
does, the cell
yeah.
phone
Yeah.
company.
The
Run.
noble savage idea.
Yeah.
Have
But I
have
think
you
we have
heard
to go
this?
with with more
Have you
sensitivity instead of
have you heard
saying,
this sort of thing, this idea that they're great, perfect, they're just perfect in their setting just as they are. Why are we bothering them?
yeah, I think it has to do with your worldview on how you look at that. If we do think that God created the world good and perfect and he's going to restore it, um, I think the difference is I need help and so do they.
Hmm.
But missionaries throughout history, not just Adventists, but other missionaries have had this Western imperialism undertone that we are oblivious to. And so we
Yeah.
go there to help them and trying to take Jesus to them, but we often take our version of Jesus, which is colored by our culture, and we lack their version of who Jesus or God might be because we don't appreciate their culture. So to go, what was her name? Carolyn, as Carolyn indicated, to go humbly as learners with them. We do have something to share, but we also have something to gain from them. And that's a whole different attitude.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
Ed Reifsnyder, I always look forward to your content because you think, maybe too much, but you think. Share with us.
There's a
Yeah,
setup.
it's possible that too much. Thank you, Steve, for teeing up this subject. I feel like it has relevance to us beyond just the specific thing of mission trips. It has to do with our whole set of attitudes and processes by which we relate to others. So thank you. I want to, something that was just said prompted this, so I didn't plan to say it, but I was doing work for the North Asia Pacific Division a few years ago. Um, and I was working with the hospital people. And I asked the Korean hospital administrators why they thought Korea had such a huge Christian population, that some of the world's biggest Christian churches are in South Korea. And I was shocked at their answer. They said, well, it appears that the United States has won, sort of in the global geopolitical sense, and Christianity is an American religion, and so therefore that's what we want to do. And I thought, oh my goodness, what an interesting perspective on why to become a Christian, because America is big and powerful and rich. But that's neither here nor there. I've been on 4 missionary trips. They were during spring break, combination of academy and college students. 2 of them were to Mexico with my older daughter, and 2 of them were to Romania with my younger daughter. I view those mission trips as mixed bags. And you've kind of indicated that, Steve, with your, let's look at this side of the coin, and then let's look at the other side of the coin. It had a definite impact on my daughters. They clearly realized that they should be grateful for where they are and what they have. It gave them a whole new attitude toward other people. On the other hand, I got the sense quite often that we were in the way of people on the other end. We were there to help them build a building or something like that, and they had people there that actually knew what they were doing. We didn't. And so sometimes I felt like we were just in the way, in a nuisance. So for me, mission trips, short-term mission trips, are really a mixed bag. And I got to wondering, seems like in these short-term mission trips that we do our usual internal facing stuff. We're very inward facing. So we may travel halfway around the world to do a short-term mission trip, but at the same time, we're going to see a bunch of Adventists. So we're keeping it in-house, so to speak, even if we're moving around the world. And we do our thing in an Adventist environment most of the time. Do we really need to spend the money to travel halfway around the world to serve humanity? Or are we just trying to gain new converts with our presence? I know that in every community that we all live in, there are people who need us. If we want to serve humanity, it's right next door. Or is that what we're really about, serving humanity? I feel like we've got this inward focus, and that everything we have to do has to be somehow advancing the Adventist cause, not necessarily benefiting humanity. I wonder what you think of that. Again, why should this kid spend $3,600 or whatever the number was you cited, go to South America when probably he lives near places that need his help?
Yeah, yeah. As indicated, you've raised quite a few questions. Let me try to be brief in responding. The impact of being grateful. Often when you see a disparity in finances, it makes you more grateful. And this family project that I'll be going on in June, I don't know, but I expect that some of the parents of the kids are taking their kids because they think their kids are too materialistic and they want them to have a wake-up call to be grateful, like your daughters were when you took them on the mission trip. So that's what they're hoping for. Sometimes it happens and sometimes it doesn't. It becomes most problematic when the kids go, yeah, we have too much. Then they start bothering their parents and saying, we should get rid of some of our stuff we have at home. And the parents come to me and say, I didn't want that much of an impact on my kids. Can you pull them back some? Because now it's starting to affect my life. Well, the reason your kids are materialistic is you live in a materialistic culture. So that's just normal. And you're living it too, and your kids are calling you out on it. And you didn't like that. You want them to change. You don't want to change. So it becomes problematic for that. We are in the way of other people. I think that often happens. I mean, to think that, for example, on construction, really, these people can't build buildings. Just look around. There are all kinds of buildings around here. They can obviously build buildings. I go with Maranatha Volunteers International. The middle name is Volunteers. And we take along a few skilled people who know what they're doing with construction, and most of the people don't know what they're doing. We could move just as efficiently if the skilled people would work and the rest would just cheer them on.
Mhm.
So why in the world do we go slower, or I shouldn't say slower, we go the same speed, but it takes 40 people instead of 5 people? We could accomplish the same amount of work with 5 people. Why do it with 40? And the reason is the same reason that God uses people to spread the gospel. It would be much more efficient just to use angels than to use humans. So why does he use humans? And I think it's because that's part of the relationship he wants to have with us. He wants to do it together. He doesn't want to do it and have us watch and cheer him on. He doesn't want to have the angels do it. He wants us to do it with him. And our bumbling efforts are good to him and good to the people. When Maranatha goes into a country, they get a group of local construction people to work for them to prepare the site for when the volunteers come. And Maranatha trains them well. They train them how to work with volunteers so that while the volunteers are working, they do not take over the skilled people. They stay in the background, but they do quality control. And they kindly come up and reteach us and show us how to relay the block the correct way. And then when we're gone, they make up for our inconsistencies and stuff. They could do the whole thing, but then the volunteers would not be participating in it. In reality, these employed people would not have a job if these volunteers didn't come and participate and now make donations that pay for the wages for these employees for Maranatha. When they hire people in a country, some of them are better workers. And when Maranatha moves to a new country, they say, would you like to go to another country? For some people, it's not practical. They have family and stuff where they are, they're not going to move. For other people, they choose to move with Maranatha and they'll go to another country and live with Maranatha. And Maranatha takes its best workers and goes to another country. They hire people who are not Adventists. And frequently they become Adventists because they're living among Adventists. They participate in the worships and stuff like that. I've been on Maranatha projects where the construction workers get baptized, the Maranatha construction workers, because that's where they are in their development with the church. As far as going to see Adventist, I don't know that in the short term we're wanting to see Adventist, but we have a network that we don't have to vet as much. If I were to go to the same town and not know, just come in blank, I wouldn't know what I was doing. Where do I connect? What difference do I make in 10 days that I'm there? When I go to Paraguay, I'm going to a place where I've met the pastor who has 9 churches, and he has picked this one as the one that needs construction. So all of that is vetted for me because it's Adventist to Adventist. I know what that is. We're going to be working with a local public school there, and I got to meet the teacher, and the teacher got to meet the pastor, who the teacher had not met before. Not the teacher, the principal. So now the principal is handing the school over to our volunteers when we were there. And oh my goodness, really? We get to go and run your school? She said, yes. The only thing I regret is I told the students and the teachers, and they wish you were coming tomorrow. You're not going to come until June. So they are anticipating our arrival. They want to mix with us. Now, what do we do with that gift? Do we lord it over them? Do we learn together? I can tell you that where I live in Sacramento, there's an Adventist school, and our music teacher is going along because somebody has given the donation to pay for the music teacher's travel and participation fee because this music teacher doesn't have the money to do it. Why is somebody paying that? Because they've been involved in a mission trip before. And so people end up giving more when they start participating. It becomes a whole experience for them. I'll throw in this other example. Sometimes a church, not a school group, not an open thing of a variety of volunteers, but a church as a whole will sponsor a mission trip. They'll go on a mission trip. And you have to be careful when you do that. You don't just have those who are going on the mission trip as the missionaries. It needs to be a whole church experience. And you just send some of your church to be the representatives of your church when they go and do the mission trip. Otherwise, you have the haves and the have-nots, and you split your church. But when it's the whole church that's participating, you have prayer partners. Let's say you're going and I'm not, but I'm your prayer partner. So you and I have to get together, and you have to tell me what you're doing to prepare. And I have to pray for you. Is this okay for people in the same church to do together? Well, I think it's the way we should be doing life together. And when you're gone, I'm praying for you. And when you come back, we get together and you tell me what happened. This is life in the community of faith. And we have found with Maranatha that when a church goes on a mission trip, their local giving for church budget goes up. Now, mathematically, that does not work because you don't get more money by giving more money. Or do you? Do you have more money if you live off of 9/10 instead of 10/10? Mathematically, you don't. And yet when you tithe, how is it that it goes farther? How is it that it multiplies? How does that work? And we find that that's what happens with people who get involved in short-term mission trips. They end up having more. So the local Adventist school, where I'm involved, they said we've had a mission project in the past of donating money, but the person who ran that has moved away several years ago, and we don't get any more reports. Some of the people from Sacramento have been on this family mission trip. You're going to go to Paraguay. What can we do to raise money for Paraguay? I said, well, they're going to need church. They're going to need chairs for their church. They're going to need a sound system. They're going to need musical instruments. They want to start a praise band, and now the music teacher is going. And so grades K to 5 said, we're going to raise $1,000 for you guys to get this stuff. How much does it come to? And I showed them the amount. It came to about $1,400. They said, okay, instead of 1,000, we're going to raise $1,500. So now when I go to church, I have kids in grades K to 5 coming to me saying, I gave $5 last week for the mission trip. Cool. So they're getting involved. They're participating in the ways that they can. Now at Christmas time, they'd raised $1,500. And now they've come to me and said, what do we do now? We've reached our goal. We have 6 months more to raise money. So I have to find other things for them to raise money for because their values are going there. And I think this is that example of where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. Your heart follows your treasure follows your heart. And so we have a community of people who are engaged in this, even the ones who are not going, in addition to the ones that are. So as far as why go Adventist to Adventist, I think the reason is to be more efficient in making contact. I can tell you that when we make plans, maybe at the most half of them come to fruition. Most of them fall by the wayside. And I'm going through it right now with our housing. Don't tell anybody going to Paraguay, but our housing is up in question now. And we're going to have some miracle. Will it happen? Yes. How? I don't know. I don't know. It's going to happen. So these kinds of things occur. I've sometimes said, I'm going to go on a mission trip, Ed, and maybe you can go with me on this one. We can do it together. I just want to point on a map and say, we're going to go there and we're going to show up and we're going to say, God, what do you want us to do? And we'll see what happens. Oh, wait, I already did that. I took a group of teenagers to Chile and we had 4 groups and the plans fell through and my group ended up at a church that was not going to do construction. And so just there on the spur of the moment, we said, we have 10 days. What can we do? And we sat in a circle and started praying. And I said, I'm the leader of your group. God is going to speak to whoever God wants to speak to. May not be speaking to me. So if God is sending you a message about what we should do for our 10 days that are here, what should we do? And none of the ideas came from me. They all came from the teenagers. And those are the things that we did. So
Cool.
you can do it that way. I still like having more of a plan.
Ed, how'd he do?
Well, he did quite a while.
I think so too. Thank you for prizing that out of him.
You were kind,
George.
Ed.
George Taishi.
Oh, I was hoping
Okay.
George would say something.
Teach it, teach it.
Taishi.
Steve, I commend you for what you do. That's a marvelous project in your life. Let me give you a little hint. When you're down there, don't say Paraguay, say Paraguay. That's the way they pronounce the place, Paraguay.
Thank you. I'll try Paraguay.
Paraguay. I'm very glad and then grateful to missionaries because in 1915, an American missionary, Pastor John Bane, he started a school in São Paulo, São Paulo City in Brazil, in the state of São Paulo. And that small school grew a lot. In 1951 or 52, my parents, we went from Europe to Brazil. I was 10 months old. And we moved close to that in the neighborhood, to that school there in 1952 or 52, let's say. And in 1957, I became a student and studied there for 16 years. That school was about 22 kilometers from from ground zero in São Paulo. And now it's a big university with 3 campuses and over 17,000 students.
Wow.
Yeah. And I must say, I got a very good education there in those days. And but my point with you is this: I'm always concerned with this kind of constructions and everything, because if you go and you construct, you build a church, that facility becomes property of the conference. And I always think that projects like that should have a match. If you are taking 15,000 from America to build something there, either the conference or the union or the division should match dollar for dollar for that. That will be very helpful, not only generating more money, but they will value this much more. And they have resources. They have resources. If not that the conference, small conference, let's say a small conference in Paraguay, it's a very poor country. You mentioned Foz do Iguaçu, the Iguaçu Falls. Someone went there. That's another story. That's in a very rich state, and the church does very well there. The church has lots of money. If they want to do something, they do. If they want to build a nice, beautiful, expensive building, they do. They might not have no small money for some poor church, but they can build a big building for themselves and all that. So I think that this would be fair, and to involve local money in the project, because that will be part of the denomination anyways. So I don't know if you have thought about this before, but I would support something like this. Yeah, $1 for $1. And this could have good results, and I think it would be better, because they will not be just getting things from the Americans, and they don't like much the Americans there anyways. They're very nationalists, and all that. But if they could participate in that, that would be a good thing. What do you think?
I think you're spot on. I think that participation is important not only for the volunteers who go, but for the people who are receiving the benefit that they are providing. Again, I do my projects through Maranatha, and the Maranatha leadership will go to how can I say this? They only go where they're invited. There are so many invitations that they don't go looking for projects. They have more invitations than we have. So let's take, I'll practice this, Paraguay. I can't get it very well. But let's say the Paraguay Union.
Yeah.
So Maranatha sends their leadership team there, and they meet with church leaders, and the church leaders say, we need 15 churches. Can we have 15 churches? And the Maranatha leaders will say, well, do you have the property for those? So if you don't have the property, we're not going to send volunteers down if you don't even have the property. Oh, we didn't think about that. Okay, yeah, well, you need to get the property. So once they have the property, now we can talk. And then the question is what you're talking about, how much buy-in? Maranatha does not do a freebie building. You have to buy in. And it varies from union to union, what they negotiate with them. And they bathe this in prayer, but they don't know going in what it's going to be. A typical one is Maranatha will provide 2/3 of the funds for materials and the labor, but the national people have to provide the land and 1/3 of the materials. And the Maranatha employees have to be housed by church members. What a union will typically do is they'll take their third and they'll divide that into thirds also. 1/3 by the union, 1/3 by the conference or mission, and 1/3 by the local church. So everybody is feeling the investment, the tug. They have to be part of this for it to happen. And so there is that kind of buy-in type of thing. The same thing happens with volunteers who go. Some people are able to write a check for the full amount, boom, and it's done, no problem. Others, they struggle to come up with the funds for, $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, depending on what it's going to be for them. And what I tell people who have a hard time getting funds, and I'm not trying to use God talk here, I really believe this. I say you need to hand this over to God and say, God, I have this desire to go. Do you want me to go? If you do, I know you can provide the funds, but I know I need to do absolutely everything that I can. So I'm going to do everything I can. And if you want me to go, you're going to have to provide the funds somehow. And if you don't want me to go, then I don't want to go. So God, it's your thing. Now let me do everything I can. So I would tell a kid like this, you need to start writing letters. You need to offer to work around here to earn money to go on a mission trip. You need to say, for my birthday, instead of giving me stuff, just give me money. I want to go on a mission trip. You have to do your part and let God open the doors or close the doors and leave it at that. And miracle stories happen. People say, you would not believe what happened. This is a miracle. And I would say, well, weren't you praying for that? And others don't go because the door is not open and they don't go. And I have to tell that person, I'm going to trust God that he has something else in mind for you for this June. And be confident of that and move forward. So the finances are very real things, but I think this is all part of the whole picture. And I agree with you, George. Just to do a handout is not a good thing to do. God's investment with us is not just a freebie. He wants it to be an ongoing relationship. I'll throw out Florida Hospital as a positive example of medical work. Florida Hospital has gone to different parts of Peru and set up an ongoing relationship where they keep going back to the same hospital and taking some of their equipment that is outdated by a year or two now and transporting it down there and setting up the hospital. And they keep going back and they keep going back and they keep going back. So I think that's a good example of an ongoing short-term things, but multiple ones that has an ongoing relationship. I think that's a great thing. Maranatha does the building and they move on, but they often will come back because, like I said, in 5 or 10 years, they have more churches that have been planted because of that, so they need more churches. Maranatha had something that they experienced in Africa. They were in sub-Sahara Africa, and in some of their simple churches they were building there, they needed water for their construction, for cement, for mortar, and things like that. And water was not readily available. People would have to walk an hour or sometimes 2 hours to get their water just for their village. And so they had to drill for water just so they could do their construction project. So they did. They brought in a drill and they drilled water and they had water and they built their building. Never thinking that when they left, you still have a well for the whole village. This was not part of the plan, but they had it. Oh my goodness. Where is the well? It's right next to the church. So where does the whole village come every day? They come to church. So now Maranatha has made that part of their plan in that part of the world, that they drill wells by the church for the construction and for the community. That sounds wonderful, doesn't it? Well, something bad can happen to that too. Some churches have monetized it and now they sell water to the villagers.
Wow.
And Maranatha's had to go back and say, freely you have received, freely give. Now,
Interesting.
I mean, I could poke fun at these people, but I would do the same thing. Okay. So I'm just as guilty, but Maranatha had to follow up and say, you can't sell the water. And if they had not done that, then we would have a bad witness, I would say, in that community. In another community, they found that the ladies were the ones who used to go and walk to get water. And it has messed up their social structure because the ladies don't talk to each other as much as they used to, because they're not walking 2 hours together every day. They just go to the church, get the water, and go home. And so there are a lot of unintended consequences that happen, and we've often not thought of those things. We just said, I went and helped them and I left. Bye. And so I think we need to be much more sensitive to that kind of stuff.
Great story. I appreciate that.
Thank you, and I wish you a great success in your trip to Paraguay.
Thank you,
And
George.
remember,
Would you please come with me and be my translator?
Remember, it's why
Good.
Paraguay. Why
Paraguay.
Paraguay. Thank you,
Paraguay,
George.
Yeah.
Linda, I admire your patience. You have been steadfastly remaining on our queue. What has moved in your mind? Share with us.
Hi, thank you, Steve. I enjoyed this. I wanted your feedback on 2 examples I'm going to give you. Number one, and this is from the secular world. Missionary, when we all remember when at least most of us, Obamacare came into view. I'm from the medical field, and we used to have patient hard copies of medical records. It was back in the day. So Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act, they mandated a certain time you had to have records digitally, electronic records. And the missionaries from on high that designed the softwares descended on us and designed systems that were very costly, and we ignored them because we didn't know. Okay, what happened the second time around? When they realized we weren't using it, they asked for us lowly people to be on their committees.
Mm-hmm.
They asked, what do you do in your day? How do you go from the time you punch in the morning? What does your day look like? How would you use this product? on how would you use the software product instead of the hard copies. They were successful when they bought in. Just the ordinary people don't know nothing about software. I know nothing about writing software or anything, but I do know what I did on a daily basis when I punched in. I do know that when they designed the new and it's been over 10 years now, that it was user friendly and it didn't take up a lot of my time. Okay, the second, and so those missionaries learned from involving the actually lowly people that actually did the job and were going to be there after they left. Okay, the second was the book you talked about, Toxic Helping.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I saw this documentary about the village. It was a village in Africa. Not a like savages or nothing. These were just people. They had like a person that did clothes. She had a boutique. She made clothes. She sold clothes to the locals. She made a living. Okay, the missionaries from America, they know there's something that happened. They needed to gather all of this, tons of clothes, and bought it there. And what did it do? It put the local people that actually made the clothes out of business. And the other one was this local farmer who had the chickens. He sold eggs to the village. That's how he made a living. So the people, they meant well. These people meant well. They gathered up and came in like a big box store with chickens and everything. So they supplied the eggs to the villagers free. So what did they do to the economy? The egg farmer, and I mean they had lots of them, but I'm just using one, was run out of business. So that made a dependent relationship on these people that came and just dumped this stuff on them. And the local people that were actually taking pride in making their own clothes, selling them to their own people, growing their own food, selling it, having an economy, it did something to them. And it made them so dependent. It actually did something to them. So I was interested in your feedback because I'm going to buy this book. I already pulled it up on Kindle. Thank you very much.
I want to respond. I have a particular need myself to go to a little room in my house. I'll be back in 30 seconds.
Good, you go. It's time. Ed Zerkwitz, can I have you piggyback on top, add on, and we'll come back to Steve in just a moment. Ed, go ahead.
Oh, shouldn't I just wait for Steve to come back or
No,
no,
let's
I
not
can
waste
start.
our time.
Let's not waste our time. Very good. Okay. So what I want to say is I went on 3 Maranatha trips with Steve, uh, Honduras, Nicaragua, and Panama, and a dozen or so years ago. So these are, as he explained, all the benefits of doing it through Maranatha. Where I got interested in going on a mission trip was an agnostic friend of mine from high school, actually. Went to Swaziland a number of years prior to when I went, and he wanted to go and help, out in. He was a teacher, elementary teacher, and he wanted to go help out in the community. I forget how he learned about it. That sort of got me interested. But what he did was he took soccer balls with him. So he took a bunch of soccer balls, and he had all the. He said, you blow up a soccer ball or a bunch of them, and you just throw them on the ground, and the kids, through their DNA, know what to do with them. You can't do that with badminton. You can't do that with a football, but somehow it's universal. So he donated some used soccer balls for me to take to each one of these Maranatha trips. And so I did the same thing. I had about 7 of them. And actually, the local Adventist kids that went on I went on family trips. They were using the soccer balls all the time in the swimming pool, in the yard where we stayed. And then also I took them down to where our projects were, and some of the local children started getting interested in what was going on because there were soccer balls there. It's sort of funny. But I can only highly recommend the way Steve does it through Maranatha. My experiences were all very positive. I was well prepared coming from Canada for the heat, but that was a real shocker to come into 100-degree, 90% humidity day after day, no let up, and
I'll bet
I
you
wasn't.
weren't raised that way.
Yeah,
My
but after a while, sorry.
Ed's story reminds me of my favorite moment on a mission trip. We're down there with a bunch of kids. Steve, you probably have seen something like this. And almost the moment we got off, we got into the village. Of course, the teenagers were out there playing with the kids. And I looked out to see what they were doing, and I heard them singing, "You put your left foot in, you put your left foot out, you shake it all about." And I thought it was delightful. I loved it. And the kids were doing it. They were having a great time.
That's good. Steve,
Well, in my
it-
experience,
go
everything
ahead.
was there. There was we got to go. There was this church that was putting on some meetings. We got to go into the neighborhood. In my group, we were praying with the households. You know, they let us in. You know, they had their dirt floors and everything, and we had interpreters, and we were praying for them, and they were so happy that someone came around and prayed, and other people were doing a vacation Bible school. I was able to participate in the medical dental part without any background like that. I was in part of the construction, the painting. The moms wanted their kids to learn how to paint, so they would come to me and I would teach the children how to paint. So as Steve said, it takes a lot longer, but it was a wonderful participatory participation by the parents and the children to be doing all these things. And I got the criticism is, why don't you just give the money to the local church? Why are you going on this trip? But you know, I had people down there through interpreters tell me, uh, or us, that you would take the time to come all the way from Canada and spend time with us. That was a miracle to them. And there was a group of women who would every morning in Nicaragua would go to their local church and pray that they could get a church built. They did that for a year and a half,
Hmm.
and like there was no money, there was no possibility, there was nothing. And so a bunch of us would go in there in the mornings and we would pray with them, and so it got us involved too, and it was a real wonderful experience. Like those 3 trips, I highly recommend them if you do them through Steve. The way he prepares everything, looks at, he's learned from his own mistakes, so he incorporates all that into it. And there's people there in their 80s. There's children that were, I don't know, 7, 8, 9 years old, whatever. It's just can't highly recommend it. I highly recommend it for anybody if they have an opportunity to go. And
Great
and
testimony, Ed.
and the thing is, I had heard about other trips done by other Adventist groups, and there were a lot of complaints from some of those. But the way Steve does them, he does them. I think he does them the best. That's my own personal experience
Thank
from
you, Ed.
from that.
I now have a PR person that I can count on. And I
You
have
are.
fond memories of doing the mission trips with you, Ed. Would love to do another one with you. Um, and I think I was much better at mission trips 30, 40 years ago than I am now. Now I see all the mistakes that I make. And here's one I just made, I think it was 2 years ago. We were in the Dominican Republic, and our medical team was doing this free clinic at the public school. The principal of the public school was a Seventh-day Adventist. So she gave us full use of the school for the students and for the people in the community. You may be aware that Dominican Republic is only 2/3 of an island of Hispaniola, and the other third is the country of Haiti. And in history, there were times when Haiti has been better off than the Dominican Republic. And right now it's the opposite. The Dominican Republic is flourishing better than Haiti. So now people are coming across from Haiti to the Dominican Republic. Should we call them illegal aliens? So they're coming over and they have no ID or things like that. Well, for our medical clinic, we're giving out medicines and we have physicians and nurses and dentists that are there. There's a free medical clinic and the word got out. So who do you suppose came to our free medical clinic? Haitians. Haitians came in droves. Now, keep in mind that our volunteers are across the spectrum politically. And for the first 24 hours, they may argue politically, but after that, we're just too busy helping people that we don't have time to argue about politics. So that's another interesting thing to experience. But you can imagine the dynamic of when the equivalent of ICE showed up at our clinic because we were serving Haitians. We couldn't tell the difference. Well, we could because of the language. And would you believe we had 2 people in our group who were Haitian? So they could speak French, they could speak Creole, and they were very valuable. But here are our medical healthcare providers, some of them having an anti-immigrant orientation, and now being on this end where they're trying to serve somebody and the political authorities are taking them away from them, and you cannot serve these people that you came to serve. Why not? Well, because they're not from the Dominican Republic, they're from another country. So you can't serve them. And the dissonance that created within our group, and this principal who was threatened by ICE, who said, we are here to serve. That's what we're going to do. Now, how do we relate to this Dominican principal who is making this decision? I mean, we walked into this completely blinded by it, and it really threw us for a loop. So again, if we would stay home, we wouldn't face these kinds of crises, but there we were, so we were faced with that. Linda, I need to respond to you. I'm sorry I had to do a bathroom break.
Thank you for remembering Linda. Thanks so much. Go ahead.
Linda, you're spot on. You're spot on. I love your stories. They illustrate it perfectly. You mentioned the word lowly. The people who are programming this came to the lowly ones who actually do the work. I think we have hierarchies for function, not for value. And when we treat the hierarchy as a value, then we treat people of differing value. We assign labels, and that is ungodly. We all are at the foot of the cross equal. I don't care how tall or old or young you are, you're equal. And so the idea of needing one another, you saw that even outside of a religious context, it makes a world of difference. When we treat people with dignity and respect and value, we need each other. We really do. And you illustrated that well. So I want to say yes, yes, yes. One of the things I've enjoyed with the teen mission trips is often people coming from North America, we have a pecking order based on race. And I'm going to pick on Hispanics. Bilingual Hispanics are often not at the top of the pecking order in their social group at their school or at their church. And when we go to these Spanish-speaking countries, and here are these bilingual teenagers, all of a sudden they become the heroes. They become the most important people. And the person who is the athlete, the person who has, 4.0 GPA, that really doesn't make one bit of difference. Those are worthless right now in our context. The person who speaks Spanish, that's the one everybody wants to be around. And so the social structure for the youth is completely upended. And now we have to start saying what makes a person valuable. Is it the fact that they can run really fast, or they can throw a ball through a net? Or is it that they can actually talk to people? That really would make a difference right now, wouldn't it? So you illustrate that well. And then putting people out of business, that's another one of those unintended consequences. You mean well, and you end up hurting people because whether it's the clothing or whether it's the eggs or what you do. One person who did construction was with me, and he said he had to do this long ditch. And his option was to go and rent a backhoe or spend the same amount of money and hire nationals to come and do it.
Love it.
He said it would take about the same amount of time. So he made the choice to hire the nationals. These were people who did not have a job for several days, and so they got to go and work, and he spent the same amount of money doing that. That's a conscious choice. He could have chosen to go with, well, let's get the work done with the backhoe that I know how to use. and he could have been the great hero and done it all himself. But instead, he chose to do the other. So those are things that we can make conscious choices about, but we also have to be sensitive because sometimes we aren't even aware of how we are disrupting things in a negative way. So thanks for bringing out both of those things, Linda. I'm so glad you waited patiently.
Thank you so much. That's perfect. I'm going to ask Bjorn to step in now for two things. He needs to run his ad again, but I've also asked him to give a short prayer to end our regular service. We still have several people in line, so don't go away. We'll finish up with everyone. Bjorn, time is yours right now.
Thank you so much. And thank you again, guys, for the support for the fundraiser. I've already made my ad. So what remains is to say our prayer, and let's just bow our heads. Thank you, dear God, for the very well-meaning people around the world that go on mission trips, and the communities that are touched, Lord. A lot can go right, a lot can go wrong on these trips. And I think many of us on this call have experienced both. But please, especially bless the young people that take part, whether they're the ones traveling or supporting, or indeed in the communities that are the recipients or the host countries. Continue to bless Steve and his work. I personally have been blessed by his work, and a lot of us here have as well. And it inspires, plants seeds, and it expands the horizons of so many kids, Lords, and families and church members. So thank you for what he does. We pray for ATSS and this virtual congregation that we have here. Thank you for blessing it. You've been with it for many years now, and I know you will continue to be with us in the future. We pray all these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much, Bjorn. Madeline Johnston, you have been around a while and you've observed a lot. I want your wisdom. Please speak up now.
Thank you. I was going to mention I've been around for 90 years now, and my husband for 95 as of next month. And
wow, congrats.
We've observed quite a bit. First, I just want to say thank you, Steve, for this very good presentation. And it's wonderful just to see you again. I always remember the time that we met unexpectedly in Russia. And we miss you here at the seminary ever since you left. But the thing I keep thinking of with so many of these stories here and the speeches people have made today, the one thing that I think is so essential for all missionaries, long-term, short-term, whatever, is a cross-cultural sensitivity. And I know it may be difficult to teach that, but I think even for short-term people, we need to make an effort to teach them before they go out to try to be careful and listen and learn and be careful what they say. We have seen it in regular missionaries. We've seen it in short-term missionaries. We've seen it in SMs. And we've seen it in general conference visitors who come to preach and teach and whatever, minister. Some people just don't have it, and they can do an awful lot of damage. When Lauren was speaking and he mentioned being embarrassed by some American, suddenly it brought to mind one experience Bob and I had when we were very embarrassed. And I don't recount this to denigrate the people involved. I'm sure they had no thought that they were being so insensitive, and they were good people. They were friends of ours, actually, and we kept wondering if we should say something, but we were afraid that it would look like a holier than thou attitude, and so I think we didn't. But we were in Romania for a month, where Bob was teaching one of these intensives for the seminary, and he's done them all over the world, and I've often gone with them. So it's been a great travel opportunity, and we've seen many other cultures. And during that month, it was several years ago, the people didn't have a lot there, and the cafeteria gave us meal tickets. We went there 3 meals a day. We had pretty much the same food each time, or at least each day. It varied very little, and to us, it maybe wasn't really special, but we knew that it was the best they had to offer us. It was nutritionally sound. We were being adequately fed. The cafeteria staff would even occasionally try to bring us a a piece of fruit or some little extra tip that they gave us as a guest that the other people didn't get. We tried to thank them every meal, to eat everything and be truly grateful for it. Well, then at the same time that he was teaching there, they had a nursing conference, and some nurses who were friends of ours from General Conference, from Loma Linda, came to speak at this, and they also were guests of the campus and had meal tickets. They would come to the cafeteria and often would come to eat with us because they knew us. And we would be embarrassed because they would sit down and start complaining about the food immediately. There were people there who could understand English, and there were a lot more people there who could understand laughter and funny looks in the face and so forth, gestures. And they wouldn't eat all the food, and they got so tired and complained of having the same thing every day. I think the worst was one evening when they brought their supper trays and sat down with us. And then they shook their heads and they looked at their driver, a Romanian student who was with them. And they said, "Oh, we can't take it again. We need you to take us down to McDonald's where we can get some good food." And they got up and left, and he took them to McDonald's and left the trays there. Bob and I were mortified. But
Yeah.
I think this kind of thing happens with Americans much more than we'd like to see. And we've probably been guilty of it ourselves, times when we didn't realize it. So I'm glad that you're mentioning that and you try to work with it with your groups.
Thank you, Madeline. Great to see you and Bob, and your influence on my life.
Yeah,
So many
sorry,
years.
but Bob is usually here and he's not snubbing you. It's just they're having an Anabaptist conference on campus now as part of our 150th celebration, and he's there all day today. But I know
I knew he was an
sorry to miss
Anabaptist at
this.
heart.
He'll probably watch it on Zoom later.
Give him my greetings, please.
I'll do that.
I teach cultural sensitivity, and I'm guilty of being culturally insensitive.
Yeah.
So, and when that happens, I'm just mortified at my own mistakes and errors and clumsiness, and it forces me back to humility after being humiliated. So I think that's a key spiritual concept of humility, and yeah, it comes back often. Kind of related to this is in a North American culture, one of the things we're often blind to is that what is the best age to be?
Mm.
And I'm not sure what the age is because it seems like you're always too young until you're always too old. I think there might be about 2 or 3 hours in between those two extremes that this is your prime spot, but then it's over. And we see this on mission trips. Young people often get to do things, and several have mentioned this. They got to help in the medical field. They got to help in some area where they were not qualified because somebody qualified was there to oversee them and they were able to assist. That would not be allowed in the United States for safety reasons, and there are good reasons for that. Also, in North America, we're a throwaway society. So as you get too old, Madeline, you would be considered too old to be of value. And so people would throw you away and cast off whatever because you're past whatever that magical age of 37 and whatever the age was. I find that on mission trips, especially these construction ones that I go on, young people and older people still make a difference. They can contribute and they're appreciated, and people want to make a difference no matter what their age is. So I might not be old enough, I might be too old, but I still make a difference. And there have been some Maranatha projects where when they show up and it's primarily older people, the hosts think, oh no, we're just going to have a bunch of funerals here in the next couple weeks. And then they're surprised at what these people who are too old actually do. And again, it challenges our cultural assumptions that there's a magical age, and we see all of our value coming from Christ, and whatever we have to offer is bonus. Thank you very much. So,
Bob is teaching a class in the seminary this semester, 94, and it will end next month. And he's bothered by the fact that this is the first one he's had to do hybrid. So he's got 28 students in the classroom and 8 on Zoom. And that's very hard for him to adjust to and figure it out, but he does it.
God bless both of you. Thank you for your service and your continued service. Courtney, you have been on the queue for some time, and I'm dying to hear your contribution. What's on your mind, and how did Steve put a bee in your bonnet?
Well, I don't want to make it sound as if there's a bee in my bonnet, but
There might
Come
be.
on, Courtney, come on.
So I have been on several short-term mission trips as a youth and as a college student to different places. And so I do see a lot of the value that Steve talks about in terms of helping young people to have like a greater perspective of the world and understanding. But one of the things that I notice here in this presentation, and a lot of times when we're preparing these kids, is that the focus is on how it's going to help our kids. That's the justification for spending a lot of the money. Oh, it helps us to be more in tune with the world. It helps us to be less selfish. It helps us to kind of be more self-reflective. And the things that Linda brought up earlier are usually thought of, well, those are, the unintended consequences. We should think about that. But I feel like we've been doing this for decades and decades and decades. The unintended consequences shouldn't be afterthoughts. They should be things that we think of before we set out on these things, saying, well, how are we impacting the local economy? How are we making the people's lives different? And is that difference going to be better for them or more difficult for them? I mean, I'm sure that, there was a little bit of a time when my internet went out, so I don't know if anybody brought this up, but I'm sure that we've all heard the stories, and this happened in my experience where I've been on one of these um, construction trips as a kid, and then we did such a poor job, and then the people there had to come and dismantle what we did and redo it, but didn't like tell us because they didn't want to make our feelings hurt, and it's just kind of like, well, are we really doing everything that we can to make this beneficial for the people that we're supposedly serving, or is this more self-serving? And I'm not saying that it's bad. Obviously, we want our kids to have spiritual development. I mean, I was a youth pastor for many years, and so I want my kids to have the ability to get that experience and everything like that. Their spiritual growth is important too, but I feel like there are ways that we can go about doing things like this that are beneficial for both, and it's not mostly us getting the benefit, and whatever the unintended consequences or intended consequences are for the people that we're serving are just kind of like, oh, it is what it is. You know what I mean?
I think I do. Let me see. You're pointing out that we seem to come from a rather selfish perspective. So we might help other people on the mission trip, but we're really doing it primarily for our own volunteers who are going.
Yeah, a lot of the times it is.
Yeah, I
And
would
it's
agree with you.
yeah.
And you said, the unintended consequences, why don't we be more intentional so we don't just describe or discover them serendipitously? And I'll come back to the Maranatha example in Africa where, they did wells without realizing this has a long-term benefit, not just for construction, but for the whole community. And then that long-term benefit can turn bad as well. So these are things that we stumbled across. So I think someone like Lauren, who said, he's been on maybe 8 mission trips, and the more he goes on, the more reflective he's seeing that there are some problems with it. That voice needs to be heard, because otherwise we'll keep on doing it just for selfish motives. Like you, Courtney, my background is being a youth pastor. And so I said, I took my kids on a mission trip because more happened for them in 10 days than 1 year's worth of Sabbath schools. So I was going for my kids. I was not going for the people where we served. In fact, I would go to Maranatha and say, you tell us where to go. I did not have a particular burden for Peru or for Mexico or whatever. Maranatha, where do you have the system set up that I can go and plug in easily? I don't have to start from scratch.
Right.
So it didn't matter to me where we went. Once that was decided, then it mattered very much. I would go down and do a site visit to find out about the place, and I would communicate that to the volunteers who were going to go. So that became a point of interest to me Why? Well, selfishly, because I wanted my kids to have a maximum experience, but I also wanted us to match up with them. Now, did we go back to the same place the next year? Usually not. So I did not have the ongoing relationship with those people that we served, in contrast to like Florida Hospital that keeps going back to the same hospital and providing services there. So I'm more of a hit and miss kind of person, but I am more sensitive to what we're doing, and yet I still make mistakes. But your selfishness speaks a lot, um, to me anyway, because I come from that perspective and I have to grow into the others and try to find out and anticipate what is the broader thing that's going on. What else can we do besides build a building here? And that's an area of growth for me. So thanks for bringing that out.
And I think that just Sherry Ann in the comments said, doing an environmental and social impact assessment before we go and making that pre-planning. And even as you brought up with Florida Hospital, making sure that we aren't just going a hit and miss, but having it be, I mean, how much more of an impact can we make for our kids than allowing them to see like, hey, we have an ongoing relationship with these people that we're going to see. And this isn't just, we're just doing this for 10 days and forgetting about it. And I think that that can benefit not only the people that we're serving, but also benefit our kids to become like a much more long-term thinkers than just for the selfish moment. So just some thoughts on that.
Yeah, thank you. I will tell you that the nature of Maranatha Volunteers International is to go from place to place to place. They'll be in a
Yeah.
country for several years and then they'll move on to another country. And the reason they've done it this way is they found that if you're going to set up to do construction of a church, you're better off doing 10, 15, 20 churches than just one and then selling the wheelbarrows and everything else like that. So they'll stay for a while, but then they move on to another country. So it's a short-term kind of thing. When the building is built, they don't provide the resources to operate the building. They don't provide evangelists. They don't provide church growth experts. They don't provide disciplers. They provide construction for urgently
Yeah.
needed buildings and move on. It's not unusual for volunteers to get an attachment to the Nationals and say, I want to help out in something more. So a year later, I want to send Maranatha a check for $1,000. Would you please send it to that country where you're no longer living, where you no longer have a presence? Because I want to still make it. It made a difference in my life, and now a year later, I've saved up $1,000. Can I get a tax deductible donation, and can you send that off to Nicaragua for me? And Maranatha says, no, we can't. We're not in Nicaragua anymore. I mean, if you want to do that, take it down to Nicaragua yourself. We can't do it. Furthermore, Maranatha's come to the point of saying, we won't do it. We're too busy doing the other, so we're not fundraising for these churches after we leave. So I was with some people last year in Peru, and on our last Sabbath there, a local choir came and sang as part of the church service, and they were dressed up in their national garb and stuff like that, and sang wonderfully. It was mainly adults, but they had one little girl in the group, and she had a stoma. There, you could just see the hole there in her throat area. And one of our physicians came to me and said, I'm going to find out about this. So he went and pursued this with a translator and found out that, yes, she could go through some kind of surgery. And this was Peru. There is the Anastal clinic that wasn't that far away, maybe an hour flight. And could we arrange this? And so he said, we're going to do this. And I'm going to help this girl take care of that. Well, that was a year ago. And next week, we were finally doing the final payment because it turned out being 3 times as expensive as we thought it would be because there were complications during the surgery. And were they supposed to let her die or were they supposed to keep her alive? And are they ripping us off? The Anastal Clinic? Well, how do we know? We're not there. This is an Adventist clinic. We believe they're doing well. And so we've had to sort through all this. And I can see why Maranatha says, we're moving on. We're moving on. So here I am a year later trying to help this guy get his tax deductible receipt for doing a good deed. No good deed goes unharmed. So that's what comes with it. That's part of being of service. There's an inconvenience. There's a cost that's involved with it. Time, money, interest, all that kind of stuff. So it's complicated. It's complicated.